You are not scrolling by accident. You are being stopped. Chosen one, there is a moment like this that arrives without announcing itself, and yet your spirit recognizes it before your mind does. Your thumb can keep moving, your eyes can keep drifting, your body can keep pretending that this is just another passing clip, but something in you has already paused at the edge of the words. Something in you knows that this is not ordinary. Something in you has been waiting for a sentence that can finally meet the ache you have been carrying in silence, because you have learned how to look fine while feeling overlooked. You have learned how to answer with a smile while carrying a tiredness nobody has named. You have learned how to keep showing up while a quiet part of you wonders whether heaven has seen how long you have been faithful without applause, prayerful without proof, obedient without visible reward. And the strangest part is that the people around you may have no idea. They may see your strength, your composure, your steady hand, but they do not see the place inside you where you have been asking, in the stillness, whether your life is being remembered at all. Stay with me, because by the end of this message, you will understand why this silence has felt so charged, why these days have carried such strange pressure, and why your spirit has been reacting to things your mind could not explain. You are not here for a generic encouragement. You are here for recognition. You are here for the kind of clarity that does not flatter you, but finds you. And what is about to be named has been hovering over your life longer than you realized. There are 3 things you will recognize before this is over. You will recognize the way certain moments have begun to feel too meaningful to dismiss. You will recognize the way old rooms, old conversations, and old expectations no longer fit the person you have become. You will recognize the way your inner life has grown louder while the outer world has remained stubbornly unchanged. And you will understand that what feels like delay is not the same thing as abandonment. You will understand that what feels like distance is not the same thing as disappearance. You will understand that the pressure you have been under has not been random, and the weight you have carried has not gone unnoticed. This message reached you by appointment, not by accident, not because you were simply passing time, by appointment. There are times when a person is intercepted in the middle of their ordinary day because something higher knows exactly when their heart is most open and their defenses are most tired. That is what this is. You were met here because there is a timing attached to your life that has nothing to do with the clock on the wall. There is a season inside you that has already begun, even if the outside of your life has not caught up yet. And something has been happening to you. You may not have had language for it, but you have felt it. You have been moving through days that seem normal on the surface while carrying an inner weather that shifts without warning. You have had moments when the familiar suddenly felt thin, when places you once fit inside no longer hold you the same way, when you sensed that you are being separated from one way of living before you have fully stepped into the next. That kind of transition does not always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as restlessness. Sometimes it arrives as stillness. Sometimes it arrives as a holy discomfort that refuses to let you remain small. You may have been waking at the same hour again and again, as if some unseen hand keeps touching the edge of your sleep and calling you upward. You may have noticed that the quiet of the night feels heavier than before, not in a fearful way, but in a way that makes you aware of your own thoughts, your own longings, your own unresolved questions. There is a difference between mere insomnia and a soul that has begun to stir at the same hour because something inside it is being summoned into attention. This is not your body failing you. This is your life becoming more awake than your routine. You may also have felt waves of emotion arrive without a clear cause. One moment you are steady, and the next moment grief rises with no obvious story attached to it. One moment you are productive, and the next moment a tenderness breaks through the surface of you so suddenly that you cannot quite explain where it came from. That does not mean you are losing control. It means something deeper than mood is moving through you. It means your inner world is no longer willing to stay numb just because the outer world prefers convenience. And there is more. There are conversations that used to feel normal now sounding hollow. There are familiar exchanges that no longer carry life in them. There are relationships, habits, and expectations that once seemed sufficient, but now feel strangely airless, as if they belong to an earlier version of you. You have not become cold. You have become honest. You have not become difficult. You have become less willing to betray your own knowing. What used to sustain you is no longer enough to feed what is growing in you now. You may have noticed numbers, repeats, patterns, little convergences that seem to follow you from place to place. A glance at a clock, a receipt, a page number, a street address, a passing remark that lands with impossible force because it arrives at the exact moment your heart was already asking the question. When these things begin happening with unusual frequency, it is easy to dismiss them as coincidence. It is easier to call it noise than to admit that your life is being addressed. But what if the pattern itself is the language? What if the repetition is not trying to confuse you, but to confirm you? Here is what these signs actually mean. They are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that something is aligning in you. The waking hour is not a punishment. The emotional waves are not chaos. The hollow conversations are not proof that you have failed. The repeated signs are not random interruptions. They are confirmations. They are the kind of confirmations that arrive before the visible shift, the kind that ask you to trust the unseen work before it becomes public. You are not being destabilized for no reason. You are being calibrated. And that calibration can feel unsettling because it touches places you have protected for years. But the discomfort itself is part of the evidence. If everything were unchanged inside you, you would not be feeling this. If your spirit was still asleep, you would not be noticing what you are noticing. If your life were meant to stay exactly as it has been, the pressure would not be this specific, this persistent, this intimate. Something is pressing on the old shape of your days because a new shape is trying to emerge. Take a breath with me. Let that settle into the place in you that has been carrying this quietly. If even one of those signs just landed in you, if one of those moments felt too familiar to deny, type the number 888 in the comments. 888 is the sign of overflow, the mark of what has been held back long enough and is now beginning to move. Type 888, then come back to me, because beneath the signs is a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. What has been happening is not merely that life has gotten harder, it is that you have been trying to live from a place that was never built to carry the fullness now rising in you. You have been standing at the edge of your own becoming while still using the language of your former survival. You have been asking an old posture to govern a new season. And that is why things have felt so disjointed. The issue is not that you lack sincerity. The issue is that sincerity alone cannot sustain a structure that was designed for a smaller version of your calling. The pattern is this. You have been over-functioning where you were meant to receive, over-explaining where you were meant to stand, over-giving where you were meant to rest, and over-holding where you were meant to release. You have mistaken endurance for obligation. You have mistaken emotional weight for spiritual responsibility. You have mistaken the constant turning of the inner wheels for faithfulness. And because you are the kind of person who takes life seriously, this pattern has been easy to sanctify. You called it loyalty, you called it maturity, you called it being dependable. But under all of that, there has been a deeper habit at work. You keep returning to places where something inside you has already outgrown the room. You keep trying to make old systems produce new life. You keep carrying expectations that were never meant to sit on your shoulders forever. You have been the one who remembers, the one who notices, the one who holds, the one who translates, the one who keeps the atmosphere together when everyone else is only interested in the surface. That role may have once protected you, But now it is exhausting you. And the cost is not only tiredness. The cost is a slow dimming of joy. The cost is a quiet erosion of spontaneity. The cost is that your inner life begins to feel like a room with the lights lowered too far, where you can still function, but you cannot fully shine. You start to become efficient where you were born to be alive. You start to become careful where you were meant to be free. You start to become so practiced at carrying weight that you forget what your own light feels like when it is not being managed for someone else's comfort. That is why this feels so intimate, because the pattern has not merely affected your choices, it has shaped your posture. It has taught your nervous system to anticipate strain. It has trained your spirit to brace before it enters a room. It has made you fluent in endurance while leaving tenderness underused. You did not choose this pattern because you were foolish. You entered it because it once helped you survive. But survival patterns are not the same as destiny patterns. What once kept you upright can eventually keep you from standing freely. And that is where the deeper layer begins. Imagine a courtyard that you have always belonged to, even before you knew it existed. Not a crowded place, not a noisy place. A courtyard with old stone underfoot, with morning light touching the edges of arches that have stood longer than your fears. This courtyard is not a performance stage. It is a home space. It is the place your spirit was made to walk in without having to pretend. But for a long time, the gate to that courtyard has seemed farther away than it really is. The path to it has felt obscured by weather, by memory, by habits of living that taught you to stay outside rather than enter. Now imagine that long ago, something in you was taught to stay near the wall, to remain useful, to remain watchful, to remain ready for the next demand. You were not born with that posture. It was placed on you. A frequency was dimmed. A softness was interrupted. A voice inside you learned to speak more quietly so that other needs would not be disturbed. And over time, that quietness became familiar enough to feel like your personality. But it was not your original song. It was the sound of an adapted self, a self that learned to survive by shrinking its own footprint. The courtyard still exists. That is the mercy of it. It was not destroyed. It was not taken from you. It was merely walked away from, and then, for a season, forgotten. But something in you has begun to remember the shape of it. That is why certain places feel thin now. That is why certain rhythms no longer satisfy. That is why you can no longer live entirely in the outer corridor of your own life. Your spirit has touched the gate and recognized the home it was made for. And if you are listening closely, you may already feel what that means. It means the dimming was never the final state. It means the silence was never the whole truth. It means the part of you that felt buried was always carrying a map back to the courtyard. That map is not frantic. It does not shout. It simply remembers. And memory, in the deepest sense, is sometimes the first form of resurrection. Stay with me because the image becomes clearer now. The gate has not vanished. The light has not gone out. What changed is that you were taught to live as if the courtyard were inaccessible, as if your own belonging had to be earned through constant proving. But belonging is not earned in a place built by grace. Belonging is received when you finally stop asking a locked memory to do the work of present truth. If the courtyard I just described is the place you felt in your chest, if that image settled somewhere so deeply that you could almost hear the echo of your own steps in it, type the words "I am home" in the comments. Let the recognition seal where it just landed. Type it, then come back to me, because now the return begins. The return is not a performance. It is not a reinvention. It is not you becoming someone else to finally deserve peace. The return is a remembering. It is the slow, holy act of stepping back into the courtyard and allowing your own life to meet you there without armor. What you have been calling survival is about to be reinterpreted as preparation. What you have been calling delay is about to be seen as gathering. What you have been calling confusion is about to be revealed as the mind catching up to a truth the spirit already knew. You do not need to force this return. You do not need to perform it into existence. You do not need to conjure a new personality or build a more spiritual version of yourself from scratch. You are not being asked to manufacture power. You are being invited to receive what was always present but not fully inhabited. The shift is subtler than effort. It is a coming back, a loosening, a willingness to stand in the courtyard without apologizing for the space you occupy, and there are a few simple anchors that can help you stay there, not as obligations, as witnesses. The first is what I call the morning seal. Before you answer the day, before you answer the world, before you answer the voices that want your attention, before your own soul has had a chance to speak, sit in silence for a short moment and remember that the gate is already open. Do not rush yourself into usefulness. Do not hand the first minutes of your life to anxiety. Let your first inward word be one of belonging. Let your first breath feel like entry rather than emergency. The second is the frequency audit. Once during the day, not with panic but with honesty, ask yourself what within you feels like the courtyard and what feels like the outer wall. Ask which conversations strengthen you and which ones leave you dimmer. Ask which tasks make you more present and which ones slowly pull you away from yourself. This is not self-obsession. This is stewardship. A steward knows what feeds the house and what drains it. A steward does not let everything enter the room simply because it is familiar, and stewardship is the great secret here. You are not being called to hustle your way back into wholeness. You are being called to tend what has already been entrusted to you. The courtyard does not ask you to earn its stone. The gate does not ask you to prove your worth. The light does not ask for your resume. It asks for your attention. It asks for your yes. It asks for your willingness to walk without gripping the old wall so tightly that your hand never opens to what is waiting in the center. You have spent long enough managing the outskirts of your own life. You have spent long enough translating your hunger into discipline and your longing into productivity. There is another way to live. There is a softer authority available to you now, not weak, softer, not passive, receivable, not smaller, truer. And once you sense that the courtyard has always been yours, the entire shape of your days begins to change. You stop asking every moment to justify itself. You begin to notice what restores you. You begin to recognize what belongs and what only resembles belonging. You begin to move from vigilance to discernment. That is the turn, that is the return, and there is still more waiting in the open space ahead. If something in this message has confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your amen without words, not as a metric, as an agreement that what was named here was named correctly. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle into the place that has been waiting longest to hear it. There is someone in your life who came to mind while this was being spoken. Someone quietly tired, someone secretly seeking, someone holding a posture nobody sees. Someone who has been strong for too long and honest with too few people. Someone whose face appeared because your heart already knows they are part of this same story. Send this to them. Not as a recommendation, as a delivery, the same way it was delivered to you tonight, by appointment. Before this closes, type the words "I am chosen" in the comments. Not as a wish, not as a hope, as a confirmation. Let your fingers say what your spirit is already learning to hold. Let that declaration rest on the whole journey you have just walked. The signs were real, the pattern was real, the return is real. And the agreement forming in you is not fragile. It is meant to last. You are confirmed. You are carried. You are being returned to yourself. You are not too late. You are not forgotten. You are not standing outside the courtyard anymore. Right now, all across the world, others are receiving this same recognition, this same quiet remembering, this same inward turning toward what was always theirs. You are not alone in this hearing. You are part of something that does not need to announce itself in order to be true. You are part of a mercy that arrives softly and stays. It is sealed. The courtyard is still open, and that is why your heart can breathe now without asking permission. The same mercy that brought you this far does not leave you halfway between one identity and the next. It meets you in the threshold, and it stays there long enough for your breathing to change, long enough for your shoulders to remember they are not made of stone, long enough for the part of you that has been bracing for impact to finally understand that not every arrival is a threat. You have spent so long expecting the next thing to cost you that peace can feel almost suspicious at first. But peace is not foreign to you. It is older than the fear. It is closer than the strain. It is the quiet place where your spirit has been waiting for your attention all along. So let the next few moments be unhurried. Let the message settle where it needs to settle. Let it move past the part of you that analyzes everything and reach the part of you that knows before it can explain. Because what is being sealed here is not a passing feeling. It is a recognition. It is the end of pretending that you do not know when something sacred has touched you. It is the end of acting as if your longing is an inconvenience. It is the end of living as if your inner life must always remain smaller than the world around you. Something greater has already placed its hand on your season, and you are not required to resist the change just because the change feels intimate. You are standing at the point where a life built from surviving begins to give way to a life built from belonging. That shift can sound dramatic, but in practice it often arrives quietly. It looks like less forcing. It looks like less performing. It looks like less explaining yourself to people who never learned how to hear you properly in the first place. It looks like a steadier yes in your chest and a quicker no in your bones. It looks like your spirit becoming less available to what drains it and more available to what restores it. That is not selfishness. That is order. That is the return of the self to its rightful place inside the life it was always meant to inhabit. And if you have been wondering whether all this inward stirring means you must now build something enormous and dramatic to prove it, hear this carefully. You do not need to become louder to become true. You do not need to become harder to become clear. You do not need to become more complicated to become complete. The return is not a performance of transformation. The return is the honest acceptance that what was scattered is now gathering. What was dimmed is now warming. What was guarded is now opening. You are not inventing a new soul. You are remembering the one you already carry. There is gentleness in that kind of remembering, not weakness, gentleness, the kind that notices when a room feels heavy and does not pretend otherwise. The kind that notices when a conversation is draining your life and no longer confuses politeness with loyalty. The kind that can sit with its own heart without rushing it out of its feelings. You have been taught, directly or indirectly, that tenderness must always be negotiated with toughness. But tenderness in its truest form is not fragility. It is the courage to remain open after disappointment, to remain honest after misunderstanding, to remain present after being overlooked. That is a strength that cannot be faked for long, because it comes from a deeper place than image. So if there is a word for this season, let it be openness, not exposure. Openness, openness to what is clean, openness to what is aligned, openness to what no longer requires you to split yourself into pieces in order to stay involved. Openness to the relationships that feel spacious instead of costly. Openness to the work that nourishes rather than consumes. Openness to the rhythm that lets your soul arrive before your obligations begin. There is nothing vague about that. There is nothing passive about that. It is a conscious willingness to stop treating your own life as an emergency. And I need you to hear this as well. The courtyard was never empty. even when you could not feel it, even when you had convinced yourself that you were walking alone, even when the noise around you made your inner life feel far away. The place that was meant for you remained untouched. It did not collapse. It did not expire. It did not grow tired of waiting. That is what makes this moment so tender, not because it is fragile, but because it is faithful, faithful in the way light is faithful to dawn. Faithful in the way a door is faithful to the one who is finally ready to enter. Faithful in the way a name is faithful to the person who has almost forgotten how deeply loved they are. You may notice in the days ahead that some things no longer grip you the same way. Some old patterns may try to call you back to the wall, but the wall will not feel as convincing as it once did. Some old expectations may try to reassert themselves, but they will sound smaller in your hearing. Some old fears may try to dress themselves up as wisdom, but you will know the difference now. You are being taught to discern the voice of survival from the voice of peace. You are being taught to tell the difference between what merely feels familiar and what is actually true. That discernment is one of the clearest signs that the return is already underway. And because you are human, because you have lived, because you have carried more than enough to know what strain feels like, there will still be moments when the old reflexes rise. That does not mean the return failed. It means your nervous system is learning a new language. It means your spirit is teaching your body that not every silence must be filled and not every pause must be defended. It means your heart is learning that it can rest without losing its place. Be patient with that learning. Be patient with the parts of you that still reach for old armor out of habit. They are not enemies. They are memories, and memories can be reformed when they are brought near enough to truth. That is why your next steps do not need to be grand. They need to be faithful. Return to the morning seal. Return to the frequency audit. Return to the simple, steady choice to honor what opens you and release what collapses you. Let those practices become the way you keep the door open once you have entered, not as rules, as rhythm, not as pressure, as care. You are not trying to earn a place in the courtyard. You are learning how to live there without apology. And in that place, you will begin to notice something beautiful. You will notice that your peace grows when you stop negotiating with everything that has already shown you its shape. You will notice that clarity grows when you stop calling confusion a virtue. You will notice that your prayers change when you stop asking for permission to exist fully. The tone becomes different. The atmosphere becomes different. You become different, not because you forced a reinvention, but because you stopped resisting the truth that was already rising within you. What rises now is not loud, but it is strong. It is not frantic, but it is certain. It is not demanding, but it is real. And the more you let it stand, the less power the old dimming has over you. That is why this message has lingered the way it has. It is not trying to entertain you. It is trying to restore your interior order. It is trying to remind you that your life is not measured by how much strain you can survive, but by how faithfully you can inhabit the place where grace has already made room for you. So breathe here. Breathe without apology. Breathe without hurrying to become useful again. Breathe as one who has been found. Breathe as one who does not need to keep.